New Jersey is making environmental history in what is being called one of the largest environmental settlements in U.S. history. DuPont and related companies have agreed to pay $2 billion to resolve claims over toxic so called forever chemicals. These chemicals are said to have contaminated water supplies and ecosystems all across the Garden State, many parts of the country as well. Former New Jersey State Assemblyman John Wisniewski, who served on the State Assembly's Environment and Solid Waste Committee during his time in office, is here to talk about what the settlement means for the public health of New Jersey residents. John, good morning to you. Good to have you on.
Good morning, Ken. Thanks for having me back on.
Thank you. They're called PFAS, right? The perfluoro and polyfluoroalkyl substances, to be formal about that. When I lived in North Caldwell, we used to get notices every couple of months. You can't drink the water. Well, why are we paying for the water? It was so infuriating. And that was because the water system was loaded with PFAS. So this is something that impacts a lot of New Jersey. Chemicals like Scotchgard firefighting foam. They seemed to be miracle chemicals right until we found out not so much. They get in the drinking water, they never get filtered out. So it is a big deal. And I know when you were on the panel, was this something being talked about in terms of lawsuits back in the day? And why did it take so long for a settlement?
Well, these lawsuits are very complicated, but thankfully, we have a set of laws on a federal level that really make it possible for states like New Jersey and others to hold these polluters accountable. And those environmental regulations are under threat as we speak today. It took decades to build up that body of law, but they're under threat. These chemicals are great advancements in science and product manufacturing, but not handled properly, wind up in the water system. It's not, it's not something that's isolated. Here in Sayreville, DuPont has one of its oldest facilities, and the drinking water wells that the borough of Sayreville used to rely on for providing water to the community had to be taken offline and water obtained from another source because the proximity of those wells to the DuPont facility and how those chemicals were mishandled, they wound up in the drinking water. So this $2 billion settlement will help with the cleanup, but it also is a reminder that this is not a one stop, one lawsuit type of thing. There are many other similar situations that deserve to be remediated. And thankfully, as we speak today, we have the laws that enable states like New Jersey to do it.
And John, isn't there a separate suit or a separate settlement, I should say, involving 3M? Wasn't that like another half a billion because of Teflon or the firefighting foam? I just want to make sure I'm not conflating the two.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a number of industrial pollutant settlements. There has been one for asbestos. There's been one for the firefighting foam. There's the one for the PFAS, and the list can go on. But everybody needs to really appreciate that absent these federal environmental laws that require accountability, none of this would be possible. And it would be up to individual communities to clean up their own water system because somebody else polluted. So it's a real benefit to every taxpayer, whether you live in Sayreville or you live in North Caldwell or you live in some other community. This is a benefit to every taxpayer because it's going to help provide better quality drinking water.
It's one thing, John, when a company comes out with a great product, and at the time we thought great product, firefighting foam, great thing, right? You have a chemical fire, that's one of the only things that could get it out, like a fuel fire on a jet engine or something. That's how you get it out. It sounds great, but the question is, how soon did those companies realize that these were forever chemicals? And did any of them keep it quiet? Now, I know when they agree to a settlement, they don't acknowledge their culpability. But
Right.
that's where it infuriates, I think, residents of a state where you think, okay, it's one thing you had a great product, et cetera, but did you find out? Did you know at some point this could kill people? And how long did you keep your mouth shut as it was poisoning people and pets, for that matter, too, living in a community? And I think that's what's so infuriating. All the money in the world doesn't even take care of that.
Well, I think you're right. You make a great point in that there has to be a level of accountability about creating chemicals that may be wonders of science, but also have a dangerous side effect. Look, Everybody uses gasoline if you have a regular gasoline powered vehicle every single day. Not handled well, that gasoline in your drinking water, that gasoline on your hands, that gasoline, in your yard is not good. And so there's two issues here: dangerous chemicals that are created to perhaps advance science or make better products. Okay, that's great, but they have to be handled, stored, and disposed of properly. And that, I think, is the bigger issue here, is that they weren't handled, stored, and disposed of properly.
Yeah. And whenever you pass those abandoned gas stations and you see they sit empty for years, chances are it's because whoever buys that property is going to have to properly clean that up because you can't
Or,
just
or the
build on top
seller,
of toxic land. Right.
right? Or
Right.
the seller,
Exactly.
and the seller just doesn't have the money. Look, there are lots of instances where there have been wonderful advancements in the 50s and the 40s. Steel structures, the superstructure was coated with asbestos to prevent fire, because at the time there really wasn't the science and the research to understand how that affects people's lungs and ability to breathe and the diseases it causes. And so, 50 years later, that's not the state of the art. And that's what happens with these type of chemicals. When they were made, there wasn't the type of scientific understanding about how they could get into the water supply. You could go on with the list, say, for microplastics that are in many cosmetics and other products that are used every day. Go out into the farthest reaches of the Pacific Ocean. You will find these man-made microplastics in fish that have not been near any continental border for days and months and weeks, but they get out into the middle of the ocean. And so science is great, advancement is great, but we also need to be protective of the environment. And this is a lawsuit that says if you're not going to protect the environment, if you're going to be reckless, you're going to be held accountable.
A friend of mine teaches in a medical school in Florida and has told me that they've done research on cadaver brains and found up to an ounce of microplastics. An ounce in some of the cadaver brains. That's a lot of
Yeah.
microplastics. Every time you brush your teeth, I don't know if they still do it, but for decades, the little granules were microplastics. So it was meant to gently remove the plaque from your teeth. Unfortunately, you swallow a little bit every single day of your life, several times a day. That stuff gets into your system. Some of those microplastics get in and they get clogged and there's nowhere to go. The question is, did the corporations know about this? And when did they find out? And why did they keep doing it? And that's really what it comes down to. So what do you think that between the federal laws that we have, the EPA laws and rules, what does this signal to the corporations about some environmental accountability?
Well, it certainly $2 billion means that their shareholders are going to be feeling a pinch because of the decisions they made many years ago. So, as a corporate matter, they're going to have to up their game and be more vigilant on how they use these chemicals. But you also know the reality is that they have an army of lobbyists in Washington and other state capitals, and they will also simultaneously be looking for ways to weaken those environmental laws. And that's what I said at the top of the interview, is that those environmental laws are under assault on a federal level by the current administration. And lobbyists who are employed by these companies are going to be looking for ways to further weaken them so they don't have to be accountable in the future. And that is up to every citizen to be mindful and vigilant about, to make sure their elected representatives are not falling prey to that kind of influence.
And it's there. I know people who are lobbyists in DC. It's rampant. It's every cocktail party. You have somebody comes up, whispers, gives a business card. Yes, some people still use them. And hey, come over to my house for dinner. It is a game. Sadly, people's lives are the result of that game. But this goes on in DC constantly. And it's been going on for decades and it's disgusting. And every time we talk about legislation to prevent it, somehow it just disappears. One
Well,
last thing before I let you go, John, and then you could hit that too. But I just want to put this out there so you can segue when you're done. I just want to make sure when that money comes into New Jersey, is it going to fall in the bottomless pit in Trenton, or will it get spent to clean up our situation? Because my fear is we always have a budget hole, and that money is just going to get spent, and then they say when we get around to it, we'll clean up the water supply in North Caldwell.
Now, these funds will be segregated. And remember, it's really two pots of money. There's an 800, almost $900 million pot of money, and then there's a $1.2 billion pot of money to make sure that there's accountability going forward should one of these companies file bankruptcy or go out of business, be acquired, cease to exist. And so the settlement is structured in a way to make sure that money is used for its intended purpose. But just going back to the point about lobbyists trying to influence legislation. Having served in the legislature, I don't see that there's a problem with people trying to influence, citizens try to influence, lobbyists try to influence. I think the real issue here is we need elected officials who are steeled enough to not fall prey to the type of influence peddling that is rampant. I mean, it's not new. It's been going on for as long as the United States has existed. The difference is the type of individuals who hold elected office has changed over time. And we need to make sure we're electing the right people, people who will stand up
Absolutely.
for the citizens who send them there and not fall prey to the siren song of lobbyists telling them about a world that is not one we want to live in.
I appreciate you coming on, and you're right on it with that, 100%. He served on the State Assembly's Environment and Solid Waste Committee, former New Jersey State Assemblyman John Wisniewski. It's always a pleasure having you on, John. Have a great day, my
Jen,
friend.
thanks for having me on.